Grow your practice, grow your wealth, grow your impact. Find out how to spend less time in the dental chair and more time on the things you love.
Welcome back to another exciting episode of the Dental Wealth Podcast. Always glad to have you here. Amazing things happening in the marketplace. As always, my sidekick, friend, colleague, Matthew Maffei in the studio in our Dallas office.
We are back, and we'll try to keep this to a non-sports related topic today. Reese and I were joking earlier, we were like, we need to talk about the Olympics today. And I was like, I don't know if our audience will quite like sport. So we're going to mix it up today, and we're going to talk about something exciting that happened recently. And I want to talk about the new space race. Elon way back had this idea for SpaceX, and he had a successful launch, and then all of a sudden people started popping up. You had, Richard Branson, Jeff Bezos, and now NASA seems to be getting involved, talking to both parties. So I want to talk about that. Somebody has a good idea, and you always say, it's the first to market advantage, first mover advantage.
Yep.
And then after that, guess what? If there's not competition, there will be.
That's right. Number one rule.
So when it comes to a dental practice, what would be their space race?
Well, I think it's pretty obvious, isn't it? I mean, I think that what you look at. I always say that it's interesting, the Heartland Dental situation where I always say it took one person to sit down. You had all these practices at $1 million, and $800,000, and we had somebody kick back at a presentation we did and say, what was it? Something like the average practice is way under $2 million, and I was like, not for long, and so it's kind of interesting. I was like, maybe you should challenge yourself a little bit, but yeah. But I think that, when we look at this and say, well, Heartland Dental came back and said, what if we create $1 billion dental office, right? And, and you have to think at the time that was absurd. The idea of it was absurd. I'm sure his friends thought he was absurd. And then you start to look at what's happening to the model. And by the way, this happened to medical. I think if you go back and, look at episode 1 or 2 or 5, whatever, of Dental Wealth Podcast years ago, one of the things I said is we'd love to keep dentistry in the hands of dentists. Well, hell, you guys are the ones selling off your industry, not me. And so I try, but the truth is dentists are looking for a check, and they're looking for a way out, and they're looking to roll up, and I understand that. But what's going to happen to the dental profession is what happened to medical. It's going to be very similar, where you have a small amount of people, probably in the cosmetic space, just the same thing as, plastic surgery has always stayed independent. Well, it's because it's in the cosmetic space. They don't need to take insurances, and they don't need to they've got a unique, if it's a facelift, you don't want the discount. You're not shopping for insurance on your facelift, right? I mean, I would hope not, right? You're just shopping for the cheapest. Don't get the cheapest facelift, right? Just don't.
Yeah. Let's go price shopping on facelift.
Right. So medical industry, and so the entire industry is rolling up. And look, I mean, we've had people push back. Oh no, it's gonna fall up. No, it's not gonna fall apart. It's look. Here's the thing, that private equity's in this game to stay. I mean, those people who think that this is a fad you're just wrong. I mean, because the equity companies are going to ultimately keep trying to roll up and sell it to the next person. It's kind of and you're going to have these giant players in the marketplace. Now, can independent dentistry thrive? That's a good question. It can, but it's going to have to be unique enough to thrive because corporate dentistry, which by the way, you look at Heartland, you can't tell if it's a Heartland office or Jim Smith DMD, right? They intentionally did that so you can't tell what they own and what they don't own. And so it's going to be this game of like, no one's going to know that it's not who owns the dental office anymore. And by the way, your primary care physician, nobody cares. They and so this is what's happening in the marketplace. Now, let's actually.
Yeah, and to touch on that a little bit, I mean, that's why you always, when I look for dental practices, so when I'm Googling dental practices and I come across the website, I can't tell if they're independent, if they're corporate, if they're any of that. And you always, one of the things you stress to clients is to tell and educate your patients on the fact that you're an independent business.
I always said that. Yeah.
So I think that's, just to touch on that a little bit before your next point is, it's hard for me to tell. Like even me, and I look at thousands of websites every day.
Well, here's the interesting part. So think about CERIC for a minute. I've talked about CERIC on this podcast. I think CERIC, people, I know some doctors love CERIC and they're like, oh, don't tell, we love CERIC. Okay, but just listen to me on CERIC. I think Patterson was the first one who, whatever, it doesn't matter. But I remember the Patterson rep coming out and the push was at first was like, I remember them saying, Eric, you'll make profit in crown number 7. And I remember saying, right now I make profit in crown number 1, and so not only did they convince doctors that they could do 6 crowns to pay for this thing, which they were already making plenty of money on the first 6 crowns. So giving up that money, but then they convinced doctors that they needed to educate their patients that same day mattered. You see, but people don't understand is that you have to educate somebody that they want it. And if you look at business, that is that's a hurdle to growing a business and a segment of a business when you have to educate someone about your product, right? So if somebody looks at your product and they don't know what it does, and you have to educate them on the benefits of it and what it does, then there's a cost that has to go into educating the people, what it does.
Yeah.
Well, but here's my point in this. You've gotten really good at being able to figure out how to educate patients on the benefits of same-day dentistry. Do the exact same thing with independent dentistry. When you're an independent dentist, if you're going to because there's something called social currency, which people love to talk about interesting stuff, right? They love to say something relevant. Nobody talks about what color socks they put on in the morning, right? They want to talk about something about what happened in sports or politics or something that happened at work that was exciting, or the accident they saw coming into work or whatever it is, right? There's something that ultimately made them want to talk about it. Well, when you start talking about the fact that you're independent, look, I want to let you know something that's special about our office. Most dental practices these days are actually becoming corporate owned. Well, corporations are really focused on profits, not dental care. So it's really important to know that Dr. Smith is a privately owned practice. And as a privately owned practice, the number one thing we care about is dental care. If you're a doctor working for a corporate outfit, you have production goals, you have all these other goals that you have to meet or you get fired. Here, Dr. Smith owns the practice. And by the way, you have to educate patients on that. What makes our practice unique is it's independently owned. And so you have to take the moment to educate patients. Now, as many times I've told doctors this, I don't think any of them have done it, but but you're going to have to do that in the future. If you're going to remain independent, you need to educate patients on why that matters to them. And by the way, let me give you an example of this. Insurance companies have done it. There's 4 really big mutual companies: Northwestern Mutual, Guardian, Mass Mutual, New York Life. Okay, these are mutual companies. Okay, what does that mean? That means that these companies are owned by the policyholders. There's no stocks, right? You can't buy stock in Northwestern Mutual. So the big 4 educate their clients, and I think Liberty Mutual is no longer a mutual company. But I remember a commercial saying like, we're a mutual company, which means our policyholders. There was a commercial where they were educating the person. And so what these companies will do is educate the client. Hey, listen, just so you know, we're a mutual company. So we're not incentivized to not pay your claim. We want to pay your claim. We're a mutual company. Technically, you own it. So the insurance companies have done an amazing job of educating people on the fact that they're a mutual company. Well, the same thing has to happen with you and your marketplace. Is you have to educate people that you're an independent dentist. And you're going to have to role play it. You're going to have to talk it through. You're going to have to be able to use it all the time. And if you do not do this, I'm telling you right now, because when you educate your patient and you say to them, I want to let you know what's different about our practice, I'm telling you, they will go tell 10 of their friends, let me tell you why my dentist is better than your dentist. We've all heard it. I've got the best doctor. Let me tell you why my dental practice. And then that person that they tell is going to be curious, and they're going to ask who owns this dental practice. And they're going to say, well, we don't know who owns this dental practice. And then, boom, you got a patient locked in. And so I think it's very, very important. And we're a little bit away from the space race conversation where we started this podcast. But I think it's important to, well, that's what I do. I go on tangents, Matthew.
Yeah, a lot of people don't understand by being independent, you almost have, we always talk about a USP, unique selling proposition.
That's right.
Well, that's, if you're an independent dental practice, you automatically have that and you don't utilize it.
It's crazy.
Explaining to people, putting that on your website, you should be
right there, independently owned.
Yeah, and what that means for the patient.
That's
like
right.
Even if you had to do a little video for it.
That's a great point. Imagine putting that right on the front cover of your website. They go there and there's a video saying, we're independently owned, and let me explain what that means. That right there is huge because look, I mean, the amount of equity that's pouring hundreds, billions of dollars are pouring into the dental marketplace right now.
Yep.
If you think you're going to compete with Heartland on supply costs, you're insane. If you think you're going to be able to compete with, eventually what's going to end up happening, it's a different system. Now we can say, well, corporations are great because they don't treat patients well, and that gives me patience. Well, let me tell you what, they'll figure that game out too. There's a balance. There's an imbalance right now because what's happening is tons of people are pouring into this space and they're really more focused on profits and roll-ups than anything else, but there will be an equilibrium that's hit, and when the equilibrium hits and it cools off because there's been enough roll-up, they are going to focus on competing against each other, and then quality of care is going to really matter because it's going to be a differentiator in the marketplace, once again, a USP. So what's going to end up happening is you got to use your own USP. Dental care is intimacy. It's almost like an OBGYN in the fact that this is a very intimate relationship. And so because it's an intimate relationship, you need to explain to somebody why it's intimate and why it matters and why that you care and why profit's not what comes first. And if you're not doing that, because I do think you as an organization need to race. I do think you need to grow and scale. The most independent dentists, the guys, the 600,000, you can, what day is it? It is July 27,
Tuesday.
2021. This podcast will probably still be on the air, not probably be on the air, it'll still be on the air, whatever, years from now. Go back and mark this date. 5 years from now, you will not find a dental practice doing $600,000 in revenue. You will not find one. They're dead. They're gone. They're going to disappear. They're going to be bought out, closed down. They're gone. If you're not doing over $1 million, you are dead in this space. I'm just going to tell you, you're dead. You won't last. You won't last another 5 years. There's no possible way.
And the funny part is that person will blame, the market and all this stuff that year instead of looking at the last 5 years, the accumulation of all of that, what happened. And we know those people.
Well, I mean,
it just happened. I just couldn't get over the hump and I didn't see it coming.
Well, and then what ends up happening is they finally go, well, I sold off to somebody. So, you probably should have. If you're a $600,000 dental practice that's been 30 years in the business, you should have sold off to somebody a long time ago and been an associate. You probably would have made a hell of a lot more money. To be completely honest with you. And that's
and the funny story is, to point on that one, we had a doctor come up to us at the GDA that we were working with, and same situation, and came in an associate and loves life.
Oh my God, yeah, right. She did. She came to us and she was like,
yeah, it came to that point and I became an associate. Now I got a brand new office to work in. I love it. And when you talk about associates too, and this is where we both kind of squirrel sometimes, but sometimes you look at play out the worst case scenario, and she played out the worst case scenario, became an associate, and was super happy. And yet that practice was probably one of those that was like, I can't find a good associate. Maybe you're looking in the wrong areas, and that was just kind of like a squirrel for everybody. But yeah, sometimes you just got to look at your options too. I mean, if you're at that point and you've done it for so long, it's time to start doing things differently.
I think that you have to do things differently. And, I remember back in the, now I'm going to date myself a little bit, back in the 80s in WWF, there's a few people listening to this right now who will know exactly what I'm talking about. The rest of you can just bear with me, okay? So
there's a sports analogy.
There's a wrestler named Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man, okay? He was one of my favorite wrestlers, and he had a tag phrase, and his tagline was everyone's got a price. And so that was it. He'd go against Hulk Hogan and Ultimate Warrior and Jake the Snake, and now we'll get into a whole other thing. But he would go. That was his thing. That was his tagline. $1 Million Man. Everyone's got a price, baby. And so what happens is that I'll hear I'm not selling. Well, hold on. What? How much? And then it's like, and then you got people who are incentivized to sell, which, by the way, this whole thing about like now's the time to sell if you really want to make money. Shut up. Look, stop. This doesn't work that way. Look, the multiples are going to be there. Anyone who's telling you need to sell now because the market's hot and it won't be like this in 3 years, just watch out for the snake oil. Okay. Just stop. Okay. Just stop listening.
It's almost like looking at the market when somebody's like comes to you and says, "Oh, this stock is so hot right now." You probably missed the boat.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think that stop. If you understand business and you understand private equity and you understand what's happening in the marketplace, by the way, $200,000 in retirement is it's nothing. It's like $800 or something. I mean, it's nothing. Yeah. Okay. So if someone tells you you're going to get an extra $200,000, just look, stop. Look, first of all, you have to look at the cash flow of your business and realizing you're probably giving up a hell of a lot more than $200,000 if by selling the practice and a cash flow perspective. But I think what we do is, and I want to make sure we're, staying focused on this podcast. I think that really, because, we'll go all over the place, right? And so I do think it's important anyone listening to this understand. First of all, the market's changing. The industry's changing. The industry is going through a complete change. It did it in medical, and actually it's happening in veterinarian and other sectors too. So what's happening, and I don't know why PE would be in veterinarian when you get an 8 to 10% profit margin, but that's a whole nother conversation. But when we start to go into what's happening in this marketplace, we would just simply say, and by the way, it's happening in optometry and other specialties too. But we look at this and say, all right, is my practice, first of all, am I staying independent? And if I'm staying independent, I need to use that as a unique selling proposition. I think that's key. Mm-hmm. Make sure you use it. Practice the language. Give it to your front office person. Give it to the person who's going to be. You got to be able to use that as we're independent. By the way, Matthew, that was a brilliant idea. That's dropping some gold right there. Put it on your website.
The marketing gold.
That's a marketing gold. So drop it on your website. Let people know, because they're going to your website to check you out. That's what they're doing. Yep. Anyone who's telling you they're buying from your website's lying to you. They're going to your website to check you out. And so when
to make sure you're legit.
What a great unique selling proposition. That's people buy differences. That's what they buy, what makes you unique. And by the way, they don't buy, we provide the safest environments and a comfortable chair. Dr. Smith cares about your care. That's all commodity. Okay, we would assume you'd care about our care, or the board would take away your license. Okay, so we assume that you're already taking care of people. So the thing is, what is the difference? Well, I'm independent. That makes a difference, because they're not there to sell profit margin. And so I think that's really important for people to understand. Second of all is that the market is completely changing. It really keeps sticking out to me, Matthew, that this person that commented, I listened to this podcast, but I don't want to pay for advice. I just get it all for free. And it just, that comment has resonated in my head forever, because the reason why it resonates in my head is just the simple fact of you're probably dead in the water then. Because you don't have, this is a strategic podcast, not a tactical podcast. And let me tell you what I mean by that. Tactical advice is given to clients. Strategic advice is given on the podcast. I could tell you what to do, but I'm not going to tell you the how to do it. That's what I get paid for, right? I mean, so what ends up happening is you're missing, I could tell you, it's like saying to a patient, you need a crown. Okay, that's strategy. But doing a crown, I could tell you need a crown. I have enough education around dental care that I could tell you need a crown. I certainly couldn't do a crown. You wouldn't want me in your mouth.
Tell you how to do it.
Right, because you got to go to dental school, right? You have 4 years to learn that. And that's my whole point, is that the tactical, the how, that's why I have an MBA, and that's why I've spent 20 years of my life in this industry. And so the how is completely different. If you're not learning the how and you just have half of the equation, you're not going to get there. You better be investing in your education. You better be investing in your growth. You better be investing in new knowledge. The day you say, I've got it all figured out, is the day you're dead in the water. If you listen to a podcast like this and say, I already know this, you're dead in the water. I promise you. And I promise you, because by the way, there are things you're going to pick up that you're like, wow, I never thought about that. And it's those things that are what the difference between you going from 1 million to 10 million. It really is. Yep. And so I think it's really important for people to understand that there's a roll up happening within the industry. You need to be competitive in the marketplace. You need to know what to do. and how to do it, the strategy and the tactical approaches to put them all in place, because by doing that, you're not only going to compete against corporate dentistry, but you're going to dominate, and you can dominate your space, and you can dominate the market, and you can roll up. Maybe you want to roll up 3-4 practices in your own area, but just because you own 3 practices does not mean you're not too. It doesn't mean you're too big to fail. The truth is that it's going to become more competitive, and unless you understand how to position yourself from a unique selling proposition standpoint, then let's go back to NASA. Yeah. You mentioned NASA, but see, here's what people need to understand in this space race. You mentioned Richard Branson and Jeff Bezos, and you mentioned
Elon
and the space race. Do you guys understand they're competing for government money? Like, just so you understand that they're going to be competing for government money, that what was happening, and it really happened after the Obama administration, is Obama killed NASA. That's what Obama could care less about. He could care less about space. He did not care about, he killed NASA. And so what happened was when Obama killed NASA, that's when the private sector took over, right?
Yep.
But there's still money going into, and then Trump revived NASA. And by the way, that's not political. I'm not trying to be political, so don't let anyone get political on me. Yeah. Okay, I'm just telling you the truth. And so what happened is when those funds that are in NASA's account, so to speak, NASA no longer flies to space. The space shuttles are gone, all that stuff. So, but NASA still has a mission, and there's still federal funds, and so they're going to be competing for federal funds, which means they're trying to be the best of the best, so that the federal government gives them the most funds. That's right. And so in a sense, what we've done is, and you've heard this saying, we've privatized space travel, and so I want you guys to understand is that when we look at your marketplace, it's the same thing in the fact of you're going to be competing for your patient's money, and you've got to understand what you can do uniquely to compete for your patient's money. And I don't mean that in a way of disrespecting patients or whatever. I'm just telling you they come to your place and they buy your services, and because you're an independent dentist, you're going to take care of them more because that's the way you're wired. You're not there for corporate profit. I mean, you're there for profits, but you're not there to make some other person wealthy. Making yourself wealthy is a lot of fun. Making somebody else wealthy, not as much. I mean, if you're working that hard and everybody else is getting wealthy, but that's not as fun. I'm not saying you can't make a good income that way. I'm just saying it's not as fun. Yeah. That if I do believe that independent dentists are suited well to take care of patients because of the way the models, and that's not to say, I'm not saying that we don't want to create general statements that all corporate dental owned, firms or have bad. I'm not saying that. Please don't take that, because I think that's, and in fact I said that at the beginning of this podcast, is that I think that'll change over time. But I am saying this, I'm saying that as an independent dentist, you need to educate your patients what makes you unique, why it's unique, and why they should still come to you. Even if the company moves across the street, they take 482 insurance plans, and they're open 365 days a year, why should they still come to you? And if you're not able to communicate that conversation, you're going to struggle in the future. Boom! I feel like mic drop, right? Mic drop. And I only dropped a little sports analogy. That wasn't even much sports right there, Matthew. That was like a quick, like a little dip. Ted DiBiase. Everyone's got a prize, baby. I'm not even going to talk.
The $1 million man.
I remember, the $1 million man, Ted DiBiase. See, some of you were listening going, man, that's my day. And some of you were going, I don't know what the world he's talking about. Yeah, WWF before it was World Wildlife Foundation or whatever.
World Wrestling Federation.
What is it now? WWE or whatever, World Wrestling Entertainment. Anyhow, on that note, look, put this stuff in place. Look, this is stuff you need to be put in place. Go back and look at a podcast like this. What do I need to do? How do I start putting this in place? How do I communicate the message? What needs to actually happen to make this happen in the marketplace? What training do I need for my team? How do I educate this? I think it's going to make a huge difference in your communication. And then how does that ultimately compete in the marketplace? Who's in your marketplace? What is your unique selling proposition so that you win your own great space race?
I love it. I love it. I do want to ask you. I know you just recently told we had some exciting announcements, so I want you to touch on it a little bit. We have a leadership retreat coming up. For those of you that are listening that are Tower clients, if I want Eric just to give you a quick little blurb about what the leadership retreat is. I know it's coming up here in November. We already have bucos of people already registering for this event, so I just want to touch on it for you avid podcast listeners. If you haven't heard about it yet, you can hear it here first from Mr. Morin himself.
It might be sold out by the time this actually gets out, but we do a leadership retreat. Obviously, last year we were pushed back, but the idea of this is an idea. The team members, you got to understand, team members don't get this stuff. They don't get personal development. They don't get personal growth. They don't get impact. They don't get all these things. And you're in the chair all day long. You're trying to communicate to them, and you don't ever get to have that message. And what happens is, even if you did, it's like your spouse telling you something. It's always like third party's always better. And the last time we did this, I tell people we ran out of tissues because we literally ran out of tissues. It was so late. It was so impactful of a few days that people, we were just opening up and being vulnerable, and people got to know their team members better than they ever had, things that they didn't even know about them. And there was a breakdown in walls, and there was hugging and high fives and laughter. And it's a 2 days that changes the trajectory of your business, because what happens is we break down these walls that have been built between individuals within the practice. And we do it in November strategically, because what that does is it prepares you going into the next year. December tends to be a crazy month, and you start a game plan going into the next year. It prepares you. And we've sold out every single time. I remember the last one we did in 2019. The Ritz-Carlton literally was like, we cannot allow you to have anyone else in the room. It was you remember, it was like wall to wall. So
packed.
Yeah, and we've actually had to move venues already once because we've already maxed out. We already filled up the first space we couldn't get anyone else in there. So we actually moved venues so we could entertain more people. We've got amazing, there's all kinds of events going to go on. There's prizes. We're going to do practice of the year. It's going to be an amazing few days, but I would promise you, your team's never had anything like this. And this is, yes, we will talk about how this all goes into your business, and how it incorporates the next year, but it's also about them and giving them, letting them know you're investing in them and you care about their future, and their vision and their lives and what they want to impact and what they want to do. We already had one person call yesterday, was like, how many people could I bring? We had a limit, because we were like, look, you can't bring 27 people. And I'm serious, because we it is going to pack. When we released the tickets, we've been asked about it like every week, but we had to finalize details because of COVID and the movements and stuff. And so when we released the details, literally we started getting all these emails like just selling it out. Yeah. So it's an amazing few days. This, there'll be multiple speakers. This is about life change. It's about impact. It's about the why, right? Simon Sinek talks about the why, right? This is the why they go to work, the why they should fight for the mission, why they should fight for the vision, why should they be there. And I will tell you, the revenue that comes out of that, the revenue that changes in the practice, not only will the revenues change significantly because of the fact that the people know the why, but they'll be high-fiving. There's a different camaraderie in the teams. There's a different communication, and we need that. We need more of that, right? We need that more in society. We definitely need it in dental practices, because there's no other place. And even if you try to do this yourself, you couldn't do it, because first of all, you're like the spouse. First of all, they're not going to listen to you so much anyhow. Second of all, you better be dynamic of a speaker, because this is dynamic few days. So I'm just telling you, I had somebody grab my arm and grab me outside of the last one, and kind of caught me off guard, and had told me that she had I don't want to get too personal, but basically that she was basically was wondering if her she should even be on this planet anymore, and how it changed her life and how it impacted her reason, her personal why. And she was crying, and it was just so impactful. And I only share that to say, look, people, they need to hear this message. They need to hear the story. They need to know why they're doing what they're doing. Yeah. They're not coming to work for pay. If you think they're coming to work for pay, you're making a mistake. And if you think that you can just pay them more, you're making a mistake. So there's nothing like this in the industry. I would argue, I don't know anything like this. It's an amazing few days. Plus, they're going to have lots of fun. We're doing it in a venue that has, oh my gosh, so much to do. And it's a great time to get away from the office. And so anyhow, if you're interested in that, you got to move quick because, and guys, that's not like a sales thing. It's because we can only put so many people. We've already moved venues once, so we can only put so many people in the space. And once it's maxed out because of COVID restrictions, it's done. I'm not going to a third space. So if that's something you want to do, and if you're outside of Tower and you say, look, that's still something I'm interested in, just reach out to us. We'd be more than happy to talk to you about it.
Yeah. Reach out to a program advisor or send an email to info@towerleadership.com, and we'll be glad to talk to you about it. And I know, the biggest thing we had was the teams were so excited for it.
Yeah.
I know we've even had most of the teams that came 2 years ago had been emailing all of us saying, are you guys going to do this? Not even the doctor. It was the teams reaching out to us saying, hey, are you guys going to do this again? Because we had so much fun the last time. So
I know, y'all are like, Eric, we need a date. We got to firm up the date. So we firmed up the date. So we've got the dates.
So.
Reach out to us information. We love to have you there. You want to be in this room. Here's what happens when people don't go in the room. They always go, I will be there next year. I wish I had been there. It's like the thing they because they'll hear about it. You'll hear about it later and you'll be like, oh my gosh, if I had been there, I would have set up my entire 2022 and I missed it. Now I have to wait another 12 months to be able to do this with my team.
To do it again.
And that's a mistake. Yeah, sure.
Yep. So like us, subscribe to the podcast. We'll be back next week.
Yeah, like us, subscribe, share to your friends, talk about this strategy. I think this is something, look, there's so much scientific study that says that teams do better than individuals, that teams will always do it better. This is scientific. Look, you're going to do better with this type of material in a team. So I always say, take the podcast and use a team approach. So share it with 3 of your friends, or, guys get together once a week, have a cup of coffee and talk about what's happening in the podcast and how you can put this stuff in place and how it will affect your practice. It'll have a dramatic impact. Absolutely. Guys, thanks for being here. Hey, everyone's got a price. Y'all have a good one. See you next time.